Hello and welcome to the WorkWise for Screen podcast, created to help our screen industries better look after all the people their businesses depend on.
And stay on safe legal ground. It's part of a growing collection of practical resources and guidance that you can dip into without it taking you forever or costing you anything. It's supported by the BFI, awarding national lottery funding.
We'll be talking with people across production, distribution and exhibition, animation, VFX and gaming about the challenges to well-being we face when deadlines and budgets are tight, and how, most importantly, to improve things. We are your hosts, Tasita Small from the Small HR Company, the HR for Entertainment one.
And Keith Arrowsmith, the legal one, a creative industries solicitor and programme director for WorkWise for Screen. Hi Tasita.
Hi Keith.
I've just been recruiting to help me get through all the work that I need to do for the WorkWise for Screen platform. And I hear you've been recruiting as well.
Yes, and it's so challenging. So the setup of my business is that I can employ employees and freelancers. And I just find it really challenging, even as somebody who supports businesses with hiring freelancers, making sense of what to do and when, ensuring that we're not breaching anything together, and just having that open dialogue to get full understanding and clarity on what it is we are both looking for out of this relationship.
There seems to be something special that you can achieve if you have that time just to make sure that you're engaging someone on the right terms and the right conditions, and there's that common understanding of what's expected from both sides of that conversation.
100%. Clarity is king.
Well, we're really lucky because we've got Sammy Kingston with us today.
Yes.
Sammy's the CEO of Virtual Umbrella. So Sammy, hi.
Hi, lovely to see you both.
The sheer fact that we have an expert and someone who does this daily brings joy to my heart.
Oh, that's lovely. But hopefully I can share a little bit of wisdom.
What do you do in Virtual Umbrella?
So before I started my business, I used to work in the theatre, and I had a recruitment call. They wanted me to go for an interview at a games company. And I kind of went back to them and was like, got the wrong person. What are you talking about? I do theatre. But my partner at the time just said, go for it. Just go on a bit of a whim. You never know. And so I went for this interview and it was fascinating. And they were getting into virtual reality gaming. And I didn't have a clue what that meant. So the CEO at the time basically let me have a play with the technology, fresh eyes on it. You get excited about the possibilities. And I joined that company for just under a year. And then as I got into the industry and this immersive world, and I was like, this is so exciting, but I don't want to just work for one company. I want to work for lots of companies and kind of just figure out my own groove within the industry. So just before I started the company, I actually was a freelancer myself. And I decided, actually, I want to start a business where I can grow with the industry. So Virtual Umbrella was founded in 2015. We started initially as a company that was helping games developers go into the industry. So back then you couldn't buy the headsets. They weren't available on the shelf. It was more of an idea that this could be something in the future, which is very exciting. It's a bit like selling a bicycle helmet when you don't have a bike. And then over time, we've diversified and changed alongside the industry, which is fabulous. And then now we kind of are more along the consultancy side, and we do large events, which is mainly immersive events. We provide the teching, the staff that look after the technology. And then recently we've become a reseller. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. And then just to point out, in business-wise, there's only two of us that work full-time. So me and my partner are directors of the company, which is quite interesting because initially starting a business, you expect to kind of grow and hire lots of people, but we never actually went down that route, which I think is interesting.
And was that a conscious decision, or was it driven by the fact that we're in an industry where things are project-led, people come and go, demands go up and down?
It's an interesting one because this industry particularly is kind of funded through lots of funding and like especially arts and that creative kind of nature. So having somebody full time didn't necessarily fit with the industry itself. I mean, there's months where me and my partner literally sat here going, what's happening next? And it just didn't seem right to bring on full-time staff when actually they could be going out there and freelancing themselves and having lots more opportunities, which I think is the best way to grow, especially in a creative industry.
And that's common, right? So whether you're in gaming, whether you're in film, TV, the organization, the company is normally quite small, 1, 2, and you might get 3 people in an organization. But whenever they go to make or build or create their thing, they then build this mini city and then they contract it back down again. How do you decide and break up? Okay, this is it now. This is where we're going to go. Are you really intentional? Is it something that just kind of creeps and grows when you're building out your team?
It really is sort of looking at the trajectory of the year and going, right, what kind of projects do we think are coming in and what kind of skill set do I actually need for those set projects? Who do we have on board? Who's available? Because again, people get busy, and that's why I like to work almost 6 months to a year ahead, because then I know that I'm booking people at the right time. There are occasions sometimes where a project might not come through, which is annoying, and it does sometimes happen, but we try to make sure that those people that we're working with have as much information as possible before they book in. And if something does sort of, not happen, we'll try and find them something else quite quickly.
So tell me how you find those people. Has there been kind of a process that you've developed to make sure you've got the right people for the right projects at the right time?
A lot of the event staff we've worked with, I've witnessed them working on other events. And I actually think that's worked out best for us, because the kind of tech that we are playing with isn't always as easy and set out as, say, like a traditional event where you're, maybe taking tickets or just looking after members of the public. It's definitely a different type of skill set. And I think seeing them in action is much better than reading something on paper. I've worked on a couple of events where like graduates or students have approached me and gone, how do I get involved with what you're doing? And that's normally where I might give them a couple of trial events or shifts, and we'll go from there. Because I think that's also a nice approach, because I don't want to bring somebody on and actually go, oh, no, this is not for me. This doesn't work. This is not what I was looking for. And I think, having that good communication and transparency is what has allowed us to bring on some people that we've had for nearly 10 years.
It's lovely because we work in a sector where people are passionate about what they do, and they can build up that level of experience and skill that they can take from project to project, and there's a real value to that. But we've also got to balance it to make sure that those new people who can come into the sector feel welcome as well. And sometimes those barriers are quite high. So yeah, hearing that you have lots of routes for people to engage with you is really heartening. I think that's going to be really helpful.
And it's nice to work with people that are passionate as well, because I fully believe in bringing people on that are smarter than me. Just because I'm a part of this industry doesn't mean I'm going to be in it forever. Those people that I'm bringing on might be part of the next awesome, epic, creative piece of content that's out there that I'm like, oh, wow, I remember when we did this together. And it's almost kind of just giving the boost back up, isn't it? I want the industry to grow and be amazing. So why not be a part of that process of pushing people into the right place and right position?
So thinking about those people, especially new to the industry, having identified them, how do you then move them from a potential team member to someone who's going to work on a project?
It can depend on the person themselves, because a lot of people, graduates, for example, they might not have necessarily done any freelancing work before. So we do have to provide a bit of guidance on contracts and how they look after like their taxes and things like that. We actually give them a few examples of maybe the types of people that we've worked with in their kind of contracts, and we give them contact details if they don't know what they're doing, which is really important because we want to make sure that they're going into it in the right way. But traditionally, if we have just somebody who's been freelancing for lots of different companies, they will come to us and say, look, these are my kind of working terms. This is my contract. I'll read through it and make sure it kind of sits with us nicely. But I'm very aware that they will have maybe a different type of working to the way I work. And they know that the kind of work that we do isn't all the time. So, for example, there could be an event which is actually 30 days, or there could be an event that's only 2. So it's almost setting expectations. So I try and set that as early on as possible, which I think, again, doesn't quite work for a full-time salary position. But it also means I think that they get paid better and they get looked after much better in that kind of circumstance, because we make sure that we take care of everything as much as we possibly can as a small business.
And what you're describing there, it sounds like your onboarding process. And no one really teaches you that. And there's a lot that's not taught when you're a freelancer as to how to be and what you should expect and what to do. You kind of pick it up as you go along, and you can pick up great habits, or you can pick up some ones that aren't that great as well. So you're kind of relying on the company that you're working with to help guide you through the correct processes. So when you're onboarding now and you've got your team together, you're now managing people who are transient. They're not going to be there for a long time. How do you create a culture? How do you bring them together and manage them? What does that look like for you?
It really is like a full-time job within my business, but it's something that is very, very important to us. So it normally is directed with me, and my partner tends to manage them on site. So I'm kind of the admin behind the scenes and making sure that everybody feels safe, everyone is happy. We ask them a lot, generally, how they're feeling. The biggest highlight to me is just continuing the communication. It doesn't matter if we've not spoken in a few months or weeks or years. It's keeping tabs and checking back in and going, hey, is this still okay? Do we need to change anything? We often find ourselves literally going, what do you need? Is there anything we've missed? Is there anything we should be improving? And I think that's the way it should work. But yeah, it's just keeping that open communication and addressing things quickly, which I think has worked well.
But you've got an event to deliver. So there's also a role as a director of the company that comes into play here. So how do you balance that need to deliver a quality product for your clients with that kind of wish to make sure that the people that you're working with have a lovely time?
I think we've always had an understanding of sort of what my role is within those events and how the staff are looked after under me. But they do know that there is a standard. It's literally called a Sammy standard when it comes to events, because, you know, I've had those conversations with them and said, look, I'm running a business because I want to do this, this and this. And my standards are this because this is the way I feel about things. And I want to make sure that our clients are having this high expectation of us because that is what we're known for. And I don't expect anyone to sort of necessarily step into that role day one and be able to get to that standard very quickly. But there is kind of a level of respect there.
So your SAMI standard seems to be working, and other organisations might call it a code of conduct. And you're right to say that, you know, you've been in business for a very long time where you know what is and is not acceptable, what you can and can't do, what's going to get this project delivered.
You can be sometimes too relaxed in situations and then maybe a little bit too harsh in circumstances. So it's trying to get into the middle ground. And also being able to kind of just have those open conversations if something's not working. I mean, we have had to have hard conversations. We've gone, look, you're not clearly understanding where I'm coming from. Let's just call it a day or whatnot in a nice way. And maybe there is some learnings from that, because that's how we grow, isn't it? Through things that happen.
And that's part of the contract, right? Being a freelancer, as long as you're terminated or you're let go in relation to the clauses within your contract, then that as a business owner is part of why you hire people potentially on a short term, because you can move people in and out in an agile way.
I'm going to ask a bit about that paperwork, because there are some times where the paperwork trail matters. Mm-hmm. Not all the time, but it's there for a purpose. So you've obviously taken a business decision to take on freelancers in order to achieve that vision of supporting the industry and producing a quality product for your events. But why are they freelancers and why aren't they part-time employees? What's that difference? How do you define that boundary?
I think it's part of my own career history, very much because I have always been surrounded by freelancers. I haven't actually explored part-time contracting, partly because of the work we do. I don't know if part-time would fit necessarily into our year. I don't want to pull someone into a part-time contract and actually I can't fulfill that with good projects, good payment and things like that.
I think there's something in the air at the moment because some people have found it really difficult to engage with team members in a way that's constructive. And sometimes that relationship's been abusive and people have been taken for granted. So we have these moments where employment law says you can't do that. That's not an appropriate way of running a business. A really good example of that, where we've said it's too dangerous to ask someone to work for 12 hours without a break. Do you run your business on the basis that those kinds of standards are inbuilt regardless of the connection you have with the team member? Or do you try and kind of separate out different roles and different responsibilities on a case-by-case basis? You know, for small businesses, there's an overhead when you're dealing with a range of relationships. So do you keep it simple?
I try to keep it straightforward, but we have always had the staff's health and safety in mind, because I know how hard they have to work within those events, and they are long days, and I don't expect anybody to work a 12-hour, 14-hour shift with no break. Doesn't matter what kind of role they've come into. I have to make sure that they are looked after, and I think that should be a standard. It's the same as things like where we look at our health and safety protocols as well. Insurance is really key. And we also say to a lot of the freelancers that come in that are doing it for first time, I always mention that to them as well, to make sure that the other events they might work on, that they are being looked after to a high standard. I would feel awful pulling somebody in for a really long event and not taking care of them. And I have been in that position before, of working on projects or events where you get burnt out and you're not looked after properly, and it's at the end of the day, it's not worth it. People are becoming more open and honest and talking about that more, rather than a lot of the time I've seen contracts where it has been completely skipped over and it's not even mentioned, which I don't think is right.
How have you learned the specific types of contracts that you need for the specific types of roles? How do you make that simple?
Gosh.
So maybe I'm asking the impossible. I'm sorry, Sammy. I'm sorry. But it's a question. It's live in my inbox, right? It's like, I've got 5 people. That one's on a fixed term contract. That one was PAYE, but I think they should have been hired as a self-employed person, because they're not going to stay around for long. And you could be a really small company and face this challenge with 5 people. You might not have the budget to go and get legal advice right now, or you might have twisted yourself up into this knot, and now you're looking at somebody like me or like Keith to help them unpick this thing.
Is really tough. We did have a situation a couple of years ago where we had the same thing, where we had 3 different types of contractors that came through, and I literally was like, I don't know how to do this. So I was very lucky, and I think at the time we had a friend who was getting into employment law. So we had a bit of a cheeky conversation.
We all need a friend like that.
I was like, we don't know how we're supposed to address this. Our accountant was also very handy at the same time, because again, we were like, we're not sure. And I don't think it's very clear in a lot of places. So we've been quite lucky where that's not happened too many times.
Desita, do you see people struggling with this kind of concept of what to do with these relationships?
It's live. We've got someone who's hired over the course of the last year and a half about 5 people in various contract types, and they're in a pickle now. They're stuck, and it's like, okay, they want us to come and unpick it, but not just for the unpicking it for the sake of it being words on a piece of paper, but it's about the relationship. It's about the business setup. Am I doing the right thing? You did the right thing when you were doing it because you thought you were doing the right thing. You didn't do anything maliciously. So let's have a look at what these relationships mean to you going forward and try and resolve the matters that you see are the issues. But actually, you've got great people doing great work. Let's just get the paperwork bit sorted out and help them to run your business. People are just unsure. And depending on what industry you're in, it's called something else. And because quite often people start a business to start a business, they don't start a business to manage people, that bit comes along with it. You think, oh, that will work itself out, or that's okay, or you put it under the rug and the rug just starts piling up like this. At some point you have to face it, right? So I'm technically great at what I do, but now I've got a team. Now I've got all these contracts, these words that are not in layman's terms. I've got to speak to this lawyer and that business affairs, and I just want to make great content or put on great events. So having this conversation, there'll be some nugget that will spark something in somebody else that will help them to either resolve or ask another question. Where we don't talk about it enough, that rug just gets higher and higher and higher. It's like a Tom and Jerry rug of people just sweeping stuff underneath it. So let's remove the rug, shake it all out, and just have the conversation, because no one has all the answers.
Exactly. It's such an interesting area because it is so complicated. And especially, like you said, if you're one person managing all of that, that's a really tricky one.
It does feel complicated, and I think that's because we've got a choice. And sometimes we get too much choice, and then that becomes the problem. We don't know how to manage the choice. The new legislation that's being discussed at the moment is supposed to introduce a kind of single worker status. So everyone gets the same rights on day one, and we don't have to worry so much about which labels apply for which roles. And that feels like a helpful step forward, but we're not there yet. We've got lots and lots of discussion to take place on what we might mean by worker status and how it will fit into this particular sector. But I think there is something around a way of articulating the relationship we want from the people we work with and how we record it on pieces of paper so it makes sense to the individual, it makes sense to the business, it makes sense to the tax authorities, it makes sense to the employment tribunals when things go wrong. Luckily, things go wrong very, very rarely, but when they do, they cost time and energy and hits the reputation. So it's worth getting the right level of work ready so that you can have those conversations when you need them. And if you need help, well, that's why we have the WorkWise for Screen platform, which will be ready to help answer some of those questions and provide some example wording that might be helpful to start those conversations. So it's a nice time to be talking about this, and thank you for helping us through what sounds to be a really exciting time for your business. And I'm sure we've all got something to learn from the kind of experiences you've had so far. And the success is obvious. It's lovely to hear that you've got through those 10 years and carry on providing that really specialist, expert advice to people who are looking at immersive tech and extended reality in a way that's going to build their skills and knowledge into their events.
Oh, thank you. This has been lovely. I've loved talking about this stuff.
I loved what Sammy said about her business. It's a really good case study for the way many businesses of creative work, whether you're VFX, post-production, so many organizations have a similar model. I learned from that, even from what I do, and I've looked at the way other people run their business and think you could learn, nuggets from what was just said there. So I think that was really helpful as a case study to understand, looking at different worker types and how we in creative can use a really adaptable, flexible model to help us run our businesses.
For me, that kind of view of what good work can be and how it has a role throughout the onboarding process, the recruitment process, the continuing process of working with people, that's universal. That doesn't matter what kind of background you are or where you are in your career or what kind of relationship you have with the business. That sense of working together to get a project out of the door seems to me to be equally valuable, whatever your background. And I think that's a really special message that Sammy was able to help us articulate in a way that I hope people will understand. But Dazizia, thank you again for your time today. Thank you also to Kelly, Andy, Dan and Gina for producing this episode, and to my colleagues Catherine, Evie, Karen, Lizzie and Val for their help with the WorkWise for Screen programme. Thanks for listening to the WorkWise for Screen podcast, supported by the BFI awarding National Lottery funding.
Our online platform provides lots of easy to understand information and invites to our events. Visit our website at workwiseforscreen.org.uk and register for the latest updates.
Please follow us on social media and join in this crucial conversation.
And contact us with suggestions for future episodes, or if you can support the programme in any other way. This podcast is produced by Podcast Labs. Music is by Benjamin Squires.